Josh Giddey's reported willingness to take less, the Chicago Bulls being out on the former draft prospects that a lot of Bulls fans are high on, and the Chicago Bulls seem to be motivated to move 3 players this offseason in separate deals. We'll talk about what those situations are and more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Derek Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And so yesterday we had a live stream after Jake L. Fisher report that Josh Giddey may be open and willing to take less, right? And, saying that it could be a 5-year deal starting at $120 million, maybe as low as Josh Giddey can go. Jake Fisher ended up following that up, kind of explaining that a little bit more, that was more so used as a starting point as far as in deals and not necessarily as that's what the willingness is to sign. Now, take that with what you said, but a lot of what we said in that is still true, right? And I think that is something to look out for, right? Is that the Bulls, if Josh Giddey is willing to take less, if he does end up taking less on the deal, that does open up quite a bit of financial flexibility for the Chicago Bulls team. And, when you pair that in with hearing that the Bulls are open to trading down in this draft, which we'll talk a little bit about later, is that, that puts you in a situation where now you have a lot more flexibility potentially financially. The Bulls have between like $17 and $18 million in cap space this season. That's after re-signing Josh Giddey, and that's after their draft pick, right? But if you're able to sign Josh Giddey for, that'll be about $5 million less, like that then goes up to almost over $20 million in space, right? Then if you're able to make one deal as far as maybe not taking back all of Vucevic's $19 million salary back in a trade, or you're able to trade off Javon Carter in another move or whatever else, you're talking about at that point the Bulls being able to get legitimately to about $30 million in cap space. Now, what are the situations in which that would happen? We talked a little bit about before that if Josh Giddey does take a little bit less, right? And this isn't for the situation of like when people are like, well, let's just not pay him. Josh Giddey at $30 million is a perfectly fine, suitable contract for starting level point guards in this league. I want to be clear here, right? So this is not one of those things where it's like, don't give Josh Giddey his money just because not to give Josh Giddey his money. No, like Josh Giddey's earned that. I think when you look at, even people using the Jalen Suggs, but then they'll say stuff like, well, Jalen Suggs is at least a two-way player. Go and look at Jalen Suggs. Jalen Suggs' offense is about inconsistent as Josh Giddey's defense. I'm just going to be 100% honest with you on that. Now, so, it's not like Jalen Suggs is this player where it's like he has no flaws in his game. No, he has some big flaws in his game. Now, he did look to shore some of that up last year before he went down with injury. But then at the same time, we can use that same thing for Josh Giddey. Josh Giddey had a better defensive season than what he's had in a lot of parts of his career. And hopefully that's going to start trending up if he's able to guard just point guards. That's where Josh Giddey is best at guarding. The thing that really kind of exposed Josh Giddey's defense a little bit more is when he's forced to guard some shooting or some small forwards and things like that because of the scheme that they ran in OKC or even sometimes here, right? So if you're able to keep Josh Giddey has really learned to use his size well against other point guards, especially as they try to drive to the paint. So, again, he's never going to be some lockdown defender. He said as much, but being active on that side of the ball really does help shore up a lot of things for Josh Giddey. But story for another day, right? So as Josh Giddey is continuing to grow on that side of the ball and grow as well, like $30 million is the $30 million. But if the Bulls do, and I've said this before, they would have to have a plan. Like, you can't just come to a player and say, we want you to take less. Okay, why do you want me to take less? And if the Bulls have a plan and say, well, we feel like we have a serious chance to acquire a player that can help this thing go, that we can be a playoff team where we can get into the playoffs, not flirt around with that playing shit, and we feel like with the East being a little bit weaker next year because of Boston coming into the season with Tatum being hurt, maybe even Jaylen Brown coming off an offseason injury. We don't know what the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to do. as far as maybe making some moves with their team. There are a lot of teams around the East that could, be making some moves or whatever else. Giannis could be traded. We feel like this is a year where we can put some things together to get us where we want to go or get us closer to where we want to be, right? And if you try to sell him on that, I think that, okay, cool. Now, there's a flip side of that as well. The Bulls very well could sign Josh Giddey to a more front-loaded contract, which affect them more upfront, right? Which this year, if they're not really trying to make a bite at a move, you sign them to a more front-loaded contract, and then the scale is de-escalating at that point. Now, like Jalen Suggs' contract, which then puts you in a place where when Modest is coming up for extensions, right, or anybody else that you draft or anybody else that you discover that you want to keep or coming up for extensions, it allows them to have a little bit more space to extend those guys. I think that's another smart move that could be here. Now, this is all assuming that AK is actually cooking something up, which he very well could not be, and I could just be doing more of his job for him than what he's actually doing right now somewhere, and that's perfectly fine if that ends up being the case. But, it's just something to look out for, right? It did kind of raise my eyebrows a little bit to hear that there could be that chance of that openness from Josh Giddey to maybe take a little bit less. But then again, I think that it has to come with a plan being there. You can't ask a player to take less. You can't ask them to do like I said on yesterday's live stream. Josh Giddey's he's not requesting his max. His max is like over $40 million. He's not requesting that, right? He's requesting a deal that he feels is suitable to what he's been given. I mean, what his performance has been, and looking at what other starters around his area has done. He's not been an all-star yet. Yes, he's a triple-double machine, and that's great, right? And I'm not a Josh Giddey hater. I can acknowledge where I came around to Josh Giddey as the season went on. I was initially pretty high on the deal. He started off the season a little bit rough. I was like, hey, this is what's happening. I'm a data-based guy. I go off what we see and what's there. If you're playing good, I'm going to say it. If you're playing bad, I'm going to say it. Josh Giddey played really well. And so you have to reward that if you want to keep that on your team. So we'll see. But ultimately, it is something to watch out for to see what this team does. And we'll see where that ends up with Josh Giddey. Does he end up staying with the Chicago Bulls at a little bit less? Does he get maybe a little bit more on a front-loaded contract initially than what's thought? All those things and options are there. And the structure of Josh Giddey's contract, that's going to be a really fun thing to see. But I do think with Josh Giddey coming back overseas from Australia, a month before free agency, that his agents, I'm sure he's doing workouts and things like that too. I'm sure it's not all about the contract, but I'm sure that's kind of a touching point for him to do as well, to make sure that they have all the information necessary so when they go to the table with the Bulls, they can make the decision to what they're going to do and keep it pushing at that point. So we'll see what the future does hold for Josh Giddey and the Chicago Bulls. I hope that future does hold him being in a Bulls uniform, regardless of not regardless, because they overpay, then it's going to be crazy. And we'll see what the future does hold for that. But one of the things that are in the future as well is the draft, of course, right? And while we have some news on the Bulls' willingness to maybe do some things in the draft, I want to talk about why Derik Queen is not on the Chicago Bulls draft board. This has been something that we've heard rumblings on. Casey Johnson has mentioned it, and it seems like this is something that's real. The Bulls do not seem, and it could be posturing. I want to be clear. There very well could be, hey, we don't want teams to think that we're going to draft Derik Queen, but there's another part of this which I'll get into, right? But it seems I said it before. Derik Queen is falling down in this draft. He's one of the people that their stock is going down. It just is in this draft. It is what it is, right? Between the wingspan of being barely right over 6'9", but with barely a 7-foot wingspan. His measurements, his wingspan put him 12th, which that's not good, right? His lane agility was not great. His standing vertical, the max vertical, were all second to last. The shuttle run was pretty bad as well. Like, he was bad in a lot of the athletic places. And so per Casey Johnson, in which he was talking about on the CHSN network, is that it seems like the Bulls are not going to be drafting Derik Queen is not on the Chicago Bulls board. It is what it is. Now, I've said before, to me, sometimes with the measurement stuff, I get it that it's the time where you overanalyze some of that, and sometimes you have to just look at the players and what they did on the basketball court when it was 5-on-5. What did they do on the basketball court, right? But you have to recognize that there are a lot of teams now saying that Derik Queen has considerably fallen down their board. He's gone from somebody who a lot of people talked about as being right outside the top 5 to now being somebody that is probably going to drop maybe even outside the lottery, right? And so that's something that, you got to keep, you got to watch, you got to monitor. But it seems like with the Bulls, and we talked about yesterday, their focus, right? They want to get two-way players in here. They want to get switchable bigs if they are big. They want to get people that can play with the pace that they like to play with, all those type of things. It's not just about the shooting, right? It's about the overall fit. And I've said this before. If the Bulls are actually looking at people that fit this roster, that says a couple of things. One, that says that you have a level of confidence in where this roster is and where it can go. Two, it means that you're actually trying to build a team smartly. One of the things that towards the end of the GarPax era, they were drafting guys just to draft them, right? Hoping that something was going to stick. Had no real thought about how those pieces were going to fit together or not fit together, which then affected how you were able to evaluate them, all those type of things. You do want to keep in mind the fit, right? Now, it doesn't seem like the Bulls are and Casey Johnson did say this, they're not as focused on a singular position, but more so the fit, the play style, and the athleticism, right? Because that is something that is part of the identity that this team is building. They don't want to put themselves in a position where you're playing with the Vucevic. Nikola Vucevic in the half-court offense for the Bulls was damn good last year. But you've seen some pretty big caveats that we've had to make defensively to overcompensate for the lack of defense that Vuce brings, namely going to a zone, the hybrid zone that we've gone to sometimes, going to a full-on 2-3 zone. Some of that has been mainly because Vuce can only play in drop coverage. So when you put it in zone, drop coverage is actually more effective in a zone defense. And so the Bulls don't want to do that anymore. They don't want to have to build a whole entire play style for your team based off a severe limitation of somebody who is a big part of that team, right? So they want to have more flexibility and fluidity in how they're building their team. And it seems like Derik Queen is not part of that. And that's an unfortunate part. Well, if you don't get it right? Like, let me be clear here. There is a huge world in which Derik Queen is somebody that a lot of these teams pass up on. And then guess what? We're looking at it in a year or so. We're looking back on it. We're like, hey, y'all, Derik Queen's actually a dog, right? Like, and a lot of teams are going to take that risk. That's the risk that you take in the draft, right? Especially when you're looking at the fit of that current team and not necessarily the best player available. So it seems like they're using a combination of best player available and position of need. They're using best player that fits their style. And that's a perfectly good, fine thing to do, right? But those going to leave players like Derik Queen off. Seems like Colin Murray-Boyles is another player that's off that. But a lot of people are off Colin Murray-Boyles, and some mocks are having him go in the second round. Now, I don't think he's actually going to go in the second round. I don't think he should go in the second round. I think C&B should definitely be into the first round pick at the least, right? See if he gets past the Thunder, because if he ends like that's, I don't know if he gets past the Thunder, to be 100% honest with you, with the defense that he's able to bring. As much as they have perimeter defenders, imagine now putting in C&B who can guard 4s and some 5s. Like that could be dangerous, right? Especially as they're trying to build a dynasty. But all that aside, right? So it's going to leave some players out. And we talked about some of the players that don't fit, and it seems like they've identified Derik Queen as a player that is just not going to be on their board. And that's fine. But what does that set the Bulls up to do? That's the thing that I want to talk about. That gets us to our last topic for today, is that hearing yesterday that the Bulls could be open to trading down, and now pairing this when you look at some of the players that could be on the board that teams could be interested in trading up for. Now, again, with mocks having guys like Derik Queen sliding, this isn't necessarily just about Derik Queen, but it is about the Bulls maybe being able to get their guy that they want, that fits their scheme, fits their play style, by trading down, picking up more assets in that, or dumping off a salary, right? Which is the prevailing thought there. And that was a really interesting part in the Grant Hughes article yesterday, is that the Bulls' openness to be trading down, if it means, well, not just if, but they'd be hoping to rid themselves of one of the contracts in doing that. So, for example, a team is calling to move up because they identify whoever it is that they wanted. First, the Bulls would have to really be confident that the player that they want, they can get by trading down. If that is an Ace Newell, if that's a Thomas Sorber, if that's those type of guys, they can't, right? Now, we know that the Igor Dimon thing was rumored. Igor could go before the Bulls. He can go after the Bulls. So just in this scenario, if Igor Dimon is their number one prospect, right, which I'm not saying that he is, the Bulls could very well wait, See if he's off the board before they pick. If he is, at that point, they're taking calls, right? So let's say whether it's the Spurs at number 14 that want to trade up 2 spots to make sure they can get their guy, right? Whether it's Derik Queen, whether it's, Carter Bryant, whoever else it is, right? Or it's the Orlando Magic who want to call up and move up from 16 up to 12, or the Minnesota Timberwolves at 17, right? As long as the Bulls are confident that they can also get their guy there, then you can say, all right, bet, we don't even need any other picks, but we do need you to take Javon Carter's salary, right? I don't know if you can get them to take Patrick Williams' salary because, again, that's a lot larger of a thing there. But, that's a possibility here. So the Bulls being open for business, being coy about who they actually want to pick, right? Because if the Bulls have it, that they're putting out there that Igor Dimon is their number 1 guy, and they know he's not going to fall outside the lottery. If teams want to trade up, they're going to have to give you something or take back something, right? Now, this is, again, speculating that AK is actually out here doing big business, right? Which, we can never really fully bet on because AK has been so wildly up and down in what he's done and not done and those type of things, the way that he's identified or not identified some things. So that's a big thing there, right? But you'd have to, identify that. You'd have to then make sure that you feel pretty damn confident that you're going to be able to get your guy later on. But that opens up a world of possibilities for the Chicago Bulls to get either more assets and still get their guy or rid themselves of a contract to kind of free up more salary leading in to the offseason and free agency, where they could go after Naz Reid. They could go after Miles Turner, which I doubt, right? They could go after name your guy, right? Or they could go after the trade market. The Bulls have a $20 million trade exception. Now, they can't use all of that because they don't have that much space under the luxury tax. You don't have to use all of it in a trade, but they can they can put themselves in a position where they can free up enough salary to then be able to make that move. And that's the thing that I'm really excited to see what the Bulls do here, right? How do they play this? Do they actually go into this like a front office that has a goal? And if they have a game plan, that changes potentially a lot for the Chicago Bulls team. We'll have to wait and see if that's actually is the approach, right? That's given AK and Eversley a lot of credit for a front office that has majorly been quiet their time running the Chicago Bulls here. But we'll see. But there's also now been reported that the Bulls have a couple of players on their list that they want to move, if possible, this offseason. Of course, number 1 is Nikola Vucevic. Should be no surprise to anybody there. We just talked about how Vuce does not fit in with the way that this team is trying to play currently. His expiring contract, 1 year left on his deal. He can absolutely try. The Bulls should be looking to move him, right? The Golden State Warriors, who were reportedly interested at the All-Star break, they could be back in on that, especially with the Bulls talk surrounding Jonathan Kuminga. They still are like the odds-on favorite for that. Then it also seems like the Bulls are, where it was like teams were calling on Lonzo, seems like now that the Bulls are more kind of focused on moving Lonzo. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that the Bulls are drafting another guard? Does that mean that they've realized, hey, we gave Lonzo this contract. Maybe that's why they gave him the contract. If you're able to move Lonzo Ball this offseason and get a Daniel Gafford back, or even let's say you get a low end or get a couple of second-round picks, that's more assets that you would have gotten had you not re-signed him and he walked away for nothing to those teams in free agency. Now, again, that's giving AK and Eversley a lot of credit for doing something or for thinking ahead of times, but we'll see, right? And especially with giving him a 2-year contract where the second year is a team option, that means the team has the choice whether they're going to pick that up or not. It really makes it a 1-year expiring contract because the team that acquires him very well could say, all right, he played 42 games for us this season. It's not worth keeping him at $10 million. We're not going to bring him back, right? Now, I don't hope that for Lonzo's career, but there is that aspect of it. So it seems like the Bulls are like, again, this is an area where there's going to be a lot of talk, right? And as much as I talk about the Bulls trading down, could they pair one of their better assets like an Ayo Dosunmu with their 12th to move up if they want to? That means that they have to identify somebody they clearly think is going to go in the lottery that they want, which we haven't really heard too much about. The only person that they've really had that they met with that's probably going to go before the Bulls draft is Trey Johnson. That's probably the only player that so far, right? And we'll see how that goes, but maybe there's a willingness to do that as well. We'll see how active this Bulls team is. I'm not counting them completely out. I'm not giving them full credit yet for something they haven't done either. It's just a lot of rumors and speculation right now, and we've got to see how that's going to work out for the Bulls. Do they do something this offseason outside of the straightforward offseason I initially had them having and just drafting their free agent, drafting their rookie, maybe signing the guy for the mid-level exception and keeping it pushing? That's initially what I had. But it seems like there's a lot more tools at the Bulls' disposal now, between their trade player exception, right? Between their mid-level exception. They have a lot of things that they can do. They can even free up a little bit more money. Let's see if the Bulls get out there and get active. But that's my time for today, guys. Make sure you guys are following us at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like we like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.